Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to participate in this important event. My speech today will shed light on an important and growing field of practice, namely the digital economy and how it could be employed to navigate through the COVID-19 crisis. To begin with, and from a global perspective, digital economy contribution to global economic growth constituted around $12 trillion or around 15% of global GDP. Earlier predictions exhibited that the global economy will reach a digital supremacy by 2023, where more than half of the GDP worldwide will be driven by digital transformations in enterprises, products and services. Let's look at some numbers from the big economic powers. In the United States, for example, digital economy contribution was accounted around 22% of GDP. In China, it was estimated around 30% and more or less the same percentage in the European Union countries. Today, there is a global consensus that perceives digital economy as one of the most effective driver of innovation and even as an engine to generate significant multiplier effects across various industry value chains. For instance, according to official data in China, digital economy in 2018 alone created around 200 million jobs. From our research data, digital contribution in Arab economies is around 12%. Compared to an average of 16% globally. This means a significant potential to upjump current numbers and improve the current staggering economic conditions in the Arab region. Various of our studies indicated that if rigorous strategies were adopted, we could move from current standing point to as high as $3 trillion in as short as 10 years' time. As you all know, that the corona pandemic came by a surprise and flipped the plans upside down. According to IMF recent report released in October 2020, the total global losses and expenses during the period of January to September accounted for around $12 trillion, which represents 12% of the global GDP. Although the global economy started somewhat to climb out of the pandemic ditch, the continuation of the COVID-19 spread is forcing countries to have a more slowed approach to reopening, while some are going back for partial lockdowns, meaning that the global economy is still prone to setbacks. So what could this mean? International projections simply imply wide negative output gaps and elevated unemployment rates this year and next year across both advanced and emerging market economies. Unemployment rates in advanced economies like US, Canada, Western Europe, Japan and Australia almost doubled in the past few months, and there is no clear visibility about the unemployment rates in other world groups, but the numbers seem horrific. Looking at available recovery approaches, unfortunately there is no straightforward solution to come out as winners from this ambiguous times and somewhat chaotic world we live in today. However, based on research studies and observations of international practices, there are a couple of strategic themes that are considered to contribute towards economic recovery and growth goals. We have seen countries that have highly invested in technology and digitalization were able to maintain better levels of productivity. If we look at the role played by the digital services during the pandemic, we can all agree that it contributed significantly towards ensuring business continuation. Countries, for instance, with high internet access and digital infrastructure operated better in vital sectors such as education, e-commerce and multiple service sectors. Unsurprisingly, we can see that the global demand for digital technologies is growing rapidly as digital transformation has become one of the major priorities to expedite the economic recovery. In fact, digital is seen as a primary vehicle and a building block for inclusive and sustainable economic growth. Our observation of the impact of digital is that it has the potential to produce 3 times the investment value of ICT sector and services. Taking into account all the untapped potential in the Arab region, in 2018 we have announced a very strategic initiative named Arab Vision for Digital Economy that was designed to support socio-economic growth in the Arab region through digital transformation. The content of the Arab Vision touch bases with key critical sectors such as digitization needs in government, businesses, infrastructure, citizens' inclusion, and in parallel across them all, emphasis on innovation and creative business models. Tens of initiatives were proposed and suggested to be embedded in the national agenda of the Arab countries. We are of a strong belief that if such vision implemented with attention to details and a focused eye on the envisaged impact, the proposed framework presents a unique opportunity to accelerate the pace of transition to meet sustainable development goal targets in the Arab region. However, such plans are framed as strategic roadmaps with long-term impact orientations. Countries definitely need in place short and mid-term climate policies in place to navigate through the current crisis. In this line, I have 5 points of what I call a must-watch for that I would recommend for policymakers. First of all, there is a clear need for further focused investment in technology endeavors to accelerate transformation and develop innovative solutions within an overall framework of building digital society and digital economy. Governments also need to pay particular attention to marginalized populations and sectors through adopting more inclusive and sustainable socio-economic development and implementation models. Such models should be designed in a way to inspire a sense of purpose and responsibility at both individuals and firms levels. As such, policies, strategies and action plans most probably would include fight and recovery approaches, but also they need to address the stipulation of creating impact at the ground and building needed instruments for fundamental strategic shifts. Governments also need to keep 2 factors in mind when launching their initiatives. One is the concentration on productivity gains and high ROI projects. And second is the need to absorb the unemployed and create more employment opportunities. The last point is about investing in people. I'm sure this term is very well known as a management and organizational theme, but what I'm referring to here is the need to uptake it at a government level. This is achieved through the provision of essential necessities such as education, healthcare, housing, culture enrichment, and more fundamentally spreading positive energy in the social system. The last element is often undervalued. Our attitude and behavior impact our performance. That is something that need to be carefully looked at, especially that COVID-19 triggered a wide negative sense on health and well-being and resulted in psychological distress and anxiety in large segments of population. I must mention here the unique and ambitious strategic behavior reward program that was announced in UAE in 2019 to encourage the local community to adopt positive behaviors. Tens of behaviors were identified and the targeted goals were cascaded across the government and the private sector agencies to encourage and reward good behavior. Indeed, to succeed in these uncertain times, out-of-the-box thinking is a skill that countries need to develop to build resilient nations. With that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you very much for your patience and listening and attending this session. Keep well and stay safe.